Our sixth reading comes from Daniel chapter 3, starting at the first verse. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshiped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever. Your Majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you. Your Majesty, they neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up." Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to these men. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue from you from my hand?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your Majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames of fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, your majesty." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way." Our response to this reading will be showing a video on someone's experience of rebuilding after a forest fire.
Practice resurrection. When I read the passage in Genesis about Noah and the ark, and I try to imagine such a massive starting over, such a time of questioning and soul-searching, I do not have to look too far for a few parallels, albeit tiny ones compared to the saga of the flood. My family and I know more than most of our peers these days about how a familiar and beloved landscape can be devastated and erased, and what it feels like to start living in a place all over again. We reside on a remote parcel of land at the far northeast tip of Great Slave Lake, 5th largest lake in North America, 300 kilometers out from Yellowknife. By June of 2014, the vast landscape of the Northwest Territories was tinder dry. A few days before the summer solstice, a swath of storms swept east out of the Mackenzie River Valley, but those thunderheads delivered only energy in the form of lightning, with little or no rain. Thousands of strikes ignited hundreds of fires, and dozens of those fires found momentum to build and coalesce, and the flames began to run wildly downwind. On Canada Day, at least 60 uncontrolled wildfires were burning east and north of Yellowknife, and some of them were threatening small communities. Firefighting crews, planes, and equipment were all stretched to the limit, and gusty winds were in the forecast. By late afternoon of July 4th, the fire front nearest to our homestead had swept in and incinerated our family home and everything in it. No people were injured. 2 loyal sled dogs perished. A hastily assembled crew of neighbors and a long-awaited firefighting team managed to save some of our buildings, and by 2 a.m. on one of those subarctic nights of endless sunlight, the danger was subsiding and the fire front had swept off to the west. 2 mornings later, we awoke alone here, the fire crew and neighbors long gone. The lingering smoke had combined with a pea-soup fog pushing inland from the icy waters of the lake. We could not even see across from the little cabin where we slept to the log walls of the workshop 15 feet away. That heavy soup of smoke and fog was exactly how we felt that day. Fogged in, smoked out, and dazed, with no clear path and no clear direction. Had the smoke and fog been an endless sea of floodwater, Noah and his people would have recognized the scene. That was 6.5 years ago, and from here it would be easy to make this just a cozy little parable of regrowth, rebuilding, and a timely Lenten metaphor for the many forms of resurrection we all witness. And that would be okay, I guess, in its cozy way, but it bears mentioning that the real path and the real story are a lot more complex, a lot grittier, as real paths and real stories always are. Our pastor recently reminded me that Jesus probably still had dirt from the cross under his fingernails when he walked out of the sepulchre. Rebirth and starting over are messy and grueling. Just ask Noah, the fellow over there, across a few millennia, mopping the deck of the ark and scratching his head. In the aftermath of our own loss, help came quickly. Supplies and gifts arrived, airplanes and a barge load, young and energetic helpers. Everything from the proverbial socks and underwear to a fancy mattress and a wheelbarrow. I remember remarking to our pastor that this certainly seemed to be a first world problem, considering the dire straits of many other stricken people around the globe. Yes, he said, it is a first world problem, but that doesn't mean it's not still a problem. It was all overwhelming at times, and on many days my own motto was, well, I just need to make it till lunch. Then dinner time, then sleep, and tomorrow will be another new day. Over the years of rebuilding and weary bootstrap lifting, the phrase, I'm just trying to make it to lunch, became kind of a mantra around here. Code words for hang in there, maybe the rainbow is still coming. Noah again. In the weeks after the fire, we sent out a written message to friends and family near and far, and at the end of that missive I inserted a wonderful poem by Kentuckian Wendell Berry called Manifesto, the Mad Farmer Liberation Front. The poem ends with a simple admonition: practice resurrection. My mother liked the ring of that line, and she had it engraved on a loaf-sized chunk of granite. This arrived by mail, and we set it up on a shelf in the workshop where it sat in plain sight over the coming years of confusion, contemplation, gradual cohesion, and reconstruction. At first, after the fire, surrounded by ash and death, we wondered if we could even stay here, and more to the point, whether we even wanted to stay. After a year or so, we had decided we would try. We would try to practice a little resurrection. And so we have. We are still here. Still, I am not going to let myself get too cozy or warm or fuzzy about all of this. The landscape here nowadays on a gray winter day is nothing anyone would be tempted to call beautiful. Downed and standing dead burnt trees dominate the snow-covered scene in every direction, in a monochrome that is without color or even sound on many a winter day. And winters here are 6 months long. Easy platitudes about wildfire being nature's marvelous path to renewal, happy odes to the verdant greens of rebirth, all ring a little hollow when a wall of flame sweeps across a valley of 200-year-old timber and leaves decades of blackened, jumbled chaos in its wake. 1 year ago, on the coldest day of winter, we moved out of the log workshop that had been hidden in the fog and smoke of that long-ago morning, and which had then become our home for 5.5 years. Up to the new house, one by one, we moved all the things a house needs to contain, from plates to books, bedspreads to dish towels. Things, the fire taught us, will be always and forever only that, things, just stuff, here today, gone tomorrow. One of the things we carried up from the workshop was that chunk of stone with its edict. It sits here now in the new cabin, surrounded by walls built of logs, felled and milled from the burned forest the fire left behind. A funny thing has happened recently, though, when I look at that rock. I have started to make practice an adjective instead of an imperative verb. As in, oh that was just a practice resurrection.
Almighty and eternal God, the only hope of the world, by the proclamation of your prophets, you declare to us the word of salvation. By the grace of your Spirit, increase the devotion of all the baptized, that strengthened by your presence, we may withstand hardship and sorrow and be united with your Son, Jesus Christ, our Savior and Lord.
Amen.